Welcome to the August 28th Hadley School Committee meeting. Let's see here, call to order. I'd like to call the motion to call the meeting to order.
So moved.
All right, second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
We need to take a vote to call the order?
You don't.
Okay.
But I'm
We all
happy to
said
do
aye.
it.
We're good. Paul's not here for the opening, but he will be on the way. Okay, first topic, district statement, commitment to social justice, inclusivity, equity, and civility. Annie, would you like me to open this, or would you? Okay. I think just in general, we wanted to reinforce our district mission and our statements that we have made throughout, both within our mission and from, I think, past practice, as well as our policies and other official district documentation, in that if you read our mission statement, we are guided by the mission to provide a safe and supportive environment that fosters cooperation, critical thinking, creativity, and integrity, and educating students to contribute positively to a global society. A lot of conversation was had around crafting that vision statement, and with those ideas in mind of a commitment from this district to social justice, inclusivity, equity, and civility, in light of just all current events, all activities, including things that we've seen in other neighboring districts. And we just thought that it might be important as we start this new school year to just reinforce that we've always had that in mind, and we continue to have that as both your goals. We see it in our district goals. We see the importance of fostering that engagement with the community in a positive and open way. So if anybody else wants to add to that, I know, Mary, you were part of the crafting of that statement as well.
I mean, it's really the cornerstone of all the strategic goals and objectives that flow out of everything that we do. And I commend Annie and her administrative team to holding fast to that. It's really important to us. It's job one for education. So I for one, am completely behind that mission.
Come in.
And so just to reinforce too, the lines of communication are obviously open to any one of us as representatives, or with Annie directly, and we would hope that should families have any concerns or even compliments that they want to share, or suggestions, that they would do so.
Absolutely. I would just add that it's easy to think, in light of current events, that intolerance, outrage, a lack of civility, discourtesy, and selfishness are the new norm. And I want to make very clear to our community, to our families, and to our students that is not the norm in Hadley Public Schools, nor is it the norm in the community of Hadley. Our public safety officers just walked in, and I know for a fact last year they went out of their way to communicate directly with people throughout our community and to remind them that Hadley is a community where all of its public servants believe in the dignity and the worth of every family member, every child, every community member. And if there's ever a time in which our policies or actions seem to indicate that we think otherwise, we encourage you to approach us, approach me, approach the school committee, because taking care of each other is of paramount importance to us. So thank you.
Okay, moving on to topic 3, approval of minutes. We've got the July 24th, 2017 minutes. Any questions, additions, revisions?
Motion approved last month's minutes.
Second. Great. All in favor?
Aye.
Welcome, Paul. Okay. No worries. Topic number 4, adjustments to the agenda. I had one. I'd like to add to number 8, school committee reports and discussion, a report out from our experience with the Mass Summer Institute that some of us were able to attend. Just a brief sharing, since we were able to go. It was a nice weekend timing that it worked out well. But any other adjustments?
Nope.
Okay. Great, then we are ready to move into the presentations and discussion items. First one, superintendent evaluation. Annie, do you want to frame this in terms of?
Certainly.
doing this
So
here?
in your packet, you have first, right after the minutes, the summary of activities and artifacts by each standard. So it's the responsibility of the school committee to evaluate me through discussion, but ultimately as one voice on my proficiency on the 4 standards the state indicates I must demonstrate proficiency on. Standard 1 is instructional leadership. Standard 2 is management and operations. Standard 3 is family and community engagement. Standard 4 is professional culture. Ultimately, you will arrive at a summative rating of just one word, all these pieces of paper to get to one word. It is important to note that as you get there, and in some of the pages to follow, you discuss each standard, performance on each standard, and performance on goals. If it is impossible for you to give me an overall rating of proficient or better if I failed to be proficient in instructional leadership. If you believe that I need improvement or I'm unsatisfactory in standard 1, that then dictates the entire summative rating, and that's what the law says. So first is a list of, just a summary, it's not an exhaustive list of everything that happened under each of these standards, but it was to give you an idea. And there are hard copies of anything that's listed and additional information in this binder. And then I gave an update on goals. There were a total of 5 goals. Thank you, I should know that, I did them. So there are a total of 5 goals. And for each goal, I indicated the status of that goal. In some cases where I write continue, it wasn't because the goal, we hadn't made sufficient progress. It was because it was something that I would continue to do. For example, active participation in town department meetings to improve coordination, communication, and collaboration with all town departments. That's met continue. It's something that I would continue to do. And from your discussion, then you would discuss the progress on each goals. When talking about goals, the categories are did not meet, made progress, met, or exceeded. And then for each standard, it is exemplary, proficient, needs improvement, or unsatisfactory. All of that to some degree.
Okay, so I think it would be helpful, we need to go through each of the standards and each of the goals. As a committee, discuss your individual ratings, any feedback, obviously, that we'd like to share, both constructive, criticism as well as compliments and or examples that we've seen. We've been supplied with some examples. Thank you for guiding us in that, and then ultimately taking then the compilation of those ratings and the discussion in mind to really the action item is the final single rating for the overall summative performance. So I think with that, should we start with the goals first?
Yes.
Okay. So the first goal, and actually I had a question,
Sure.
Annie, do we set these goals annually for you, or are these carryover from?
Some are
prior?
carryover, and some are different from year to year.
Okay.
So the full participation in the 3rd and final year of the induction program obviously isn't a carryover goal, but some of them do carry over. Just
So as we think about feedback, we should
Mhm.
be thinking about
Yep.
thinking ahead to
Yep.
framing future goals for.
Yep. And in
for the
September and
next
October,
evaluation.
I would be bringing, based on your feedback, I would provide you with, this is what I think you'd like me to work on. This is what I think you want to see in terms of the direction of the district improvement plan or the district strategy. So I would bring those goals back to you, talk about them, give me more feedback, and then I'd bring a final copy for you to vote in the fall.
All right, goal number 1 was a professional practice goal. And so we've got some examples here in terms of increasing your knowledge and skills in professional practice and successful management of the district, including the new superintendent induction program, active participation in town department meetings, and furthering of job-related knowledge and skills through participation in targeted PD activities that you've cited here. So I think on this one, I'll pick up on my thoughts and we can dialogue on this. I feel like you've cited quite a few examples, especially in their last bullet about participation in targeted professional development activities. And in our discussions, you have always brought those examples and ways that you have been able to either leverage those, you know, cross conversations that you've had, knowledge that you've gained, knowledge you've been able to share, or your interest in sharing that knowledge with others. So, you know, personally, I would compliment you on the willingness to want to benefit others, not just ourselves, which I appreciate, because I think that when everybody else benefits, we can all rise together. So personally, you has exceeded on that goal.
So I would concur. What I also would add to that is not just the knowledge that you bring on those things, but the aplomb, the diplomacy, professionalism, the humor that's appreciated. And it's a small town, and if you manage through the small town departments well, I think you represent the school very well.
I would agree, and I would say that your presence amongst superintendents at CES is noted regularly at CES board meetings, and so your contribution is valued in the broader region, and you're clearly driving the value from and bringing new knowledge to Hadley from those area connections.
I'd like to add too, even though I'm new to the school committee, it was evident prior to being, even just a few months, it was very evident prior to being on school committee that you were actively engaged in all these things. I always saw you at functions, and I've always heard of a lot of professional development, either through staff themselves or through other groups. So even not being on the committee, I've seen it.
And I would just agree with what everybody else said. It's accurate.
Yeah, okay. Goal number 2, provide leadership that has an impact on instruction and student learning. This one is the instructional leadership student learning goal that's aligned with standard 1 of standards of effective administrative practice and district strategic objective A.
I will kick this one off and say that I think what you've provided here as evidence is solid. I've personally been very pleased with your level of responsiveness to key things that are happening in the individual grades, like the addition of a 8th grade for an additional teacher that took a lot of leadership. It was an additional investment, and so it was heartened by that, and I've also been pretty pleased with the way in which you've restructured and continue to explore ways to improve special education services in our district.
Yeah, I think you're bringing, especially to this forum, student progress information and how that actually does influence some of the either initiatives that we will be focusing on, or changes that may need to be made, or areas of attention. I think that's very helpful. So I feel like that this goal is being met and continues to, you continue to bring things to us in a way to keep that ongoing. Anything else on both?
I would just say that your commitment to the students is evident as witnessed both as a member of the school committee and as a member of the community.
Thank you. Particular commitment to various students.
Okay, goal number 3, ensure a safe, efficient, and effective learning environment. This is a student learning goal aligned with standard 2 of standards of effective administrative practice and district objective B. I think I'll just bring in, I think your citation of the diversity aspects of, we've heard much about that over the last year plus in terms of those efforts and how they have been realized in the school, and trying to foster and continue to foster that safe environment, including even just the framing that we opened with today. So I know that there is more that can be done in this area, but I feel like your performance is meeting the goal that we had laid out. And while we would expect that to continue, that we can think about ways that we can shift this to more. How can we continue to support this area even further, whether that's through gathering more feedback, we've talked about the family survey, or if there are other ideas in terms of how to improve and continue to offer that safe, efficient, and effective learning environment for students.
One that I've been thinking about, and I think it fits under here, is this idea of vision into the future. With declining enrollment, stagnant or increasing costs. How do we reconcile that? I know we're so busy day to day. Where do we want to be 5, 10 years from now? What does the Hopkins and elementary schools of the future look like? And I think you're a good person to help us transition into that.
I think your points too about technology awareness belongs in here, in that technology is here, it's here to stay, it's only growing, but how do we use that? It's the best of our abilities in making sure that there's that literacy and understanding among students about the consequences of technology and that immediate.
It sort of creates new ways to be unsafe.
Yeah.
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 Let's be safe there.
Yep. But it is part of a learning environment. That's, you can't escape that. It really is.
Teaching our students to be responsible young citizens now is such an asset for them. And your focus on that throughout is so valued, not just as a school committee member, but also as a parent and community member. I also really appreciate that you're using this opportunity to also give voice to young women around gender equity issues and creating those conversations as well. So I'm really pleased at the constant focus on continuously improving our environment.
That means a great deal coming from me, because I know sometimes in a very friendly way, Humira and I sound like we're on opposite sides of the tech divide. I say, unplug everything, take it all away. Which is not the solution.
It's not our world.
Right. I know. Okay, goal number 4, this is the student learning goal. Implement key enhancements to improve family and community engagement, which is aligned with standard 3 and the standard of effective administrative practice in our district objective C.
I think you've done a great job on that. I think your communication, your weekly emails out summarizing are positive, informative. Little things like that can go a long way.
I would add to that and say that the weekly emails are they're so valued, they're almost a necessity. And I think if it doesn't happen, there's, people remember that it isn't coming. So maintaining consistency on that is important going forward, I think.
And I would agree, and I would say you would have exceeded this, in my opinion, just because of how on top of it and how proactive you are in all these different areas. And I think that right now, this particular past year in general has been such a challenging year for parents and for students, and your proactive approach on it all, and getting information out there and making resources available and taking that proactive approach is really important. So I think you've gone above.
I think if there's one area that we could improve upon, is that email is such a one-way dialogue sometimes, and creating more pathways where people can connect with you personally as well as with your administration on these kinds of subjects, things that open up that dialogue. There's lots of sports stuff, there's lots of music stuff, all those parents consistently come out, but for all the others who are on the fringes, creating pathways for them is important.
Yeah, I think if you have ideas around how to facilitate that type of dialogue environment. I think a while back we were talking about, like a coffee chat series that I think you did at the very
I
beginning.
did. Let's just revisit that. That the first year, 2 people came, they were a mother and father from the same family, and the next year 1 person came.
We have to go to different venues.
Yeah.
I
Find
guess,
them where they
yeah.
are.
I'm happy to, but it was more of a reflection on, I said to my brother, oh my gosh, I was on the phone, they're pouring in. They were going to a sporting event. I didn't get the overall on this, I'm sorry. Is that a Matt on goal 4? Matt?
I think we're at that. Okay, and the last of the goals, promote the success of all students by nurturing and sustaining a culture of reflective practice, high expectations, and continuous learning for all staff. And on this one, this is aligned with, it's a student learning goal aligned with standard 4 of the standards of effective administrative practice and district objective D.
So personally, I think you've exceeded this, and then I know that the citations you've had, for me, it was a bit more about the role model. So that was a big goal as well. Setting high standards for yourself.
And helping other people bring out the highest standards they may have for themselves in a safe way.
I would agree with that. Overall, with both what you cited as examples and other examples we've seen over the last couple of years.
Lots of contrast there.
Yes. Right. Okay, anything else feedback-wise on goals, or should we move to the performance standards? Nope. Okay. Performance standards. So on this, we have 4 performance standards. The first one is instructional leadership. That the education leader promotes the learning and growth of all students and success of staff by cultivating a shared vision that makes powerful teaching and learning the central focus of schoolwork. So in this one, we shift to a different scale from unsatisfactory, needs improvement, proficient, and exemplary. Increased ratings. I'm somewhere between proficient and exemplary on this because I know that there is always been that open dialogue. You've cited a number of examples of how you've strived, can't talk, to incorporate, as somebody who works in assessment, the idea is that you don't want to test just for the sake of testing. You want results to actually be utilized towards something, towards some improvement, towards some meaning. And that's how you get the most value out of it. And I think that you've cited a number of examples of how you've been able to do that, but not just do that in the background, also bring that to us so that between, the general audience and parents and us as parents have a vested interest in knowing how this is happening in the schools.
Yeah, so for me, the tip towards more exemplary, and in part because not just the results, which are obviously very important, but the manner in which it's done and carrying it on.
All right, standard 2, management and operations. The education leader promotes the learning and growth of all students and the success of all staff by ensuring a safe, efficient, and effective learning environment using resources to implement appropriate curriculum, staffing, and scheduling. That's easy, right? It is a lot. I have this as exemplary. We talk about this all the time, and kudos to Chris too for just keeping us all in line as to what the status is, what our numbers are. But to me, Annie, I think you're the one that brings that to what's the reality of what that means. Like, what does that mean impact-wise in the building? What does it mean in terms of outcomes for our own children? What does it mean in terms of looking ahead, what does it mean in terms of morale? So I value that because it's not just numbers, you know?
I would echo that.
Yeah, I would as well, and I think you're exceptionally good at being resourceful, so utilizing the current resources that you have, being able to adjust and shift to the strategic needs of the district. So I think that I would lean towards exemplary there as well.
I would agree as well. Also, as setting evidence is like the increase in the fourth grade, the additional fourth grade class, because those students needed those lower class sizes, all that kind of stuff. I would lean towards exemplary in this one as well.
Okay, standard 3, family and community engagement. The education leader promotes the learning and growth of all students and the success of staff through effective partnerships with families, community organizations, and other stakeholders that support the mission of the district.
Definitely, this is an area you show extraordinary leadership in, and we discussed how that we've seen that in diversity, in social justice, in gender equity, and all the work that you've done. And I feel like this last year has been especially challenging in light of the local, regional, and national climate, that you've had to really focus inward. And I think the piece of, through partnership with families and community organizations, perhaps, we perhaps could do more of that. And by necessity, you've had to focus inward, and you've done an extraordinary job on that. And I would say that this, perhaps we could say proficient and strive for exemplary.
I would agree.
Okay, standard 4. Last standard, professional culture. The education leader promotes success for all students by nurturing and sustaining a school culture of reflective practice, high expectations, and continuous learning for staff.
Well, if there ever one was one that was exemplary, this is the one that I would have picked right off the bat, because, and I contrast this with the culture amongst teachers like 6 years ago when I first started as school committee members. I feel like you've nurtured such a positive environment amongst the faculty and administration that is bringing out the best in their work, and doing that at a very high expectations. So I think that this has been a very strong way.
I think if you, over the coming year, I would like to hear more about other leaders in the school that feel like they are able to own and move forward with initiatives under, per your mentoring and leadership, but your example, but having them really represent that they feel like they owned this. And we've seen a couple examples of that in the past in terms of student-led initiatives with a faculty sponsor, if you will, helping them. I like hearing those things because, again, it's nice to know that you're fostering that environment and that people feel comfortable knowing that they can step into that kind of leadership role, which may be outside of their comfort zone. Knowing that. Do we have a rating on this one for proficient? Yeah, the last one.
I could go between proficient and exemplary, and I'm happy to have others weigh in to help make that decision.
I think you set high expectations for me, and we model them. So I'm comfortable with that exemplary.
Okay, so that is all the goals and the standards. So now stepping back, we need to give you an overall, the 1 rating, which is on the same scale as the standards. Unsatisfactory needs improvement, proficient, and exemplary. So I think it's really where we are between a proficient and an exemplary rating, given everything you just said.
All those
Is there
exemplaries
a
don't
word
add up
between?
to.
I ended up averaging them,
Is
yeah.
that 3 to 1? Right, 3 exemplaries to 1 proficient, is that
Yeah.
from standard? 4, right, so maybe we can,
Do the goals factor in too?
Yeah.
not, yeah.
I would
Yeah.
say.
Yeah.
So for me, it's not a mathematical equation.
Right.
It sort of adds up with, I think the importance is to give you feedback, honest and constructive feedback.
Yeah.
You're not perfect.
Right.
But you're sure trying, and I think that goes a long way too. To me, it's exemplary. I think we're lucky to have you. I think you're a great addition to the school, and I think we're better to have you.
I'd like to add on and echo to that. I agree with the exemplary because I agree it's not just about the numbers and looking at all the projects that you've worked on and but just your compassion, your enthusiasm, your dedication, your support to all parties, to the students, to the parents, and to the faculty, that goes a long way.
And your responsiveness to students, especially thinking about the dress code, thinking about like things along those lines. I would totally echo what was said here as well.
I would as well. I'm thrilled that we have you here. I'm proud that we have you here. I think that you're so skilled in many ways that my one caution would be not to spread yourself so thin that you feel like you're not able to fully commit to those initiatives. And there's so many of them. But I think that where you have been able to put your attention into things, that it's clear, because those things excel and get done.
Thank you for everything that you do.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so as an action item then, I'm hearing a motion to have an overall summative, I would need a motion for an overall summative performance of an exemplary rating for Annie's 2016-2017 superintendent evaluation. Do I have a motion?
Motion to have summative overall mark of exemplary for any for the school year.
Second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I would just quickly say thank you very much. All the things you said were humbling and incredibly kind. I love my job here. I do love the kids, I love the families, I love the parents, I love working here. I am happy coming to work every day. And like I say to my colleagues, even when I'm having a bad day, there's no other place or group of people I'd rather be having a bad day with or with. So I am incredibly grateful, and I also am eager to do more, to engage families more, to make them feel like it is two-way communication, it isn't always going out. And, the bottom line is, as a goal, I want every adult, every family, every child who encounters an adult in this district and who encounters me to know that they're seen and they're loved. And so we'll keep at it. So I am striving for the perfect. I don't think I'll get there, but that's what I'm striving for. So thank you very much. And I couldn't do this work, obviously, without the help of Chris, all of the administrators, and our next up guests, right? So some of our, if I could just say, when we talked about family and community engagement, our public safety officers, Chief Mason, Officer Romano, Chief Spanknabel, we met, they brought the principals in, and they brought me in last week, and they're always so good, always in the schools, always helping teachers. And we had a great conversation about ways that we can support and help our families and our community. And some of the things we've talked about as a school committee, I mean, where it's just really challenging, it's just really tricky to be a parent. It's just not easy. So they had great ideas and they're on board, and I'm so grateful. And you guys have no idea And now they're gonna teach us how to hide when bad things happen.
All right. You
Thank
guys
you.
are up. Enhanced lockdown procedures and recommendations for safety and security.
Is that okay to say here? Or should I just move?
Oh, you're fine, you're fine.
So, first off, thank you for having us. We really don't have to take up too much of your time. This is really more of kind of a first step for us. We would like to get your blessing, so to speak, to move on to future steps. As Annie said, we've already taken some steps with the superintendent and the staff, but we were all three of us introduced. We also brought Trooper Carmichael with us. He and your school resource officer Romano here have worked closely together to put together a lot of the different things that we would like to move into as far as enhanced lockdown go. He has a lot of a wealth of experience. He's been doing this for a long time, so we brought him along just in case you had any questions, and we're all going to look to him when we have blank looks on our faces. Just ask him. So as I said, we don't intend on taking up too much of your time, but really quickly, as far as we kind of got lucky to come on a night that Annie was being evaluated, because we could not feel more the same as what she just said about us. You chose an unbelievable superintendent. She has, if one of your bullet points that you were evaluating her on was an open two-way communication with public safety, which is tremendously important to us. She is exemplary in that field as well. She has just been tremendous.
We were going to hold up tens, but
Yeah, I didn't think it was appropriate. We're going to pass out papers. We're not here to intending on teaching you anything or doing any training or anything like that. Really, what we were hoping for is just to have an open discussion with you and to, as I said, get your blessing to move forward to the next step. We are all certified ALICE instructors. If you've ever heard the term ALICE before, it is. Okay, ALICE is a proprietary training model that came out several years back, and in essence, it is a build-off of the old standard lockdown, which is what we've been doing for years. It is a way of offering staff and students other options rather than simply locking yourself in a room. And as I said, it is a proprietary training method. Since ALICE came out, there have been a whole lot of other things that have also come out in studies and in other trainings that use blends of different training techniques, but they're all really kind of geared around the same idea, which is let's not just lock ourselves in a room and hope the police get there in time. So, as I said, we're all instructors in ALICE, but really what we would like to do is present Hadley with a more, as I said, a blend of the best practices that are used around the country. There are things, for example, the FBI uses run, hide, fight, which takes some of the principles of the ALICE program. The Department of Homeland Security, I believe, uses, I forget exactly what they call it, but get out, hide out, take out. These are all principles and ideas that are built around, like I said, enhancing the lockdown process. What our goal is to change the way that we do our lockdowns in essentially all hazard training for our kids here in Hadley. And we'd like, as I said, to take those best practices, and we would like your blessing to move forward with that. Our next step essentially would be to get buy-in from the parents of the kids of Hadley. Annie was gracious enough, as soon as we came up with the idea of ALICE and we went to the training, she was all over it. Do the training, let's go, let's get it done. So we have already taken those first steps as far as the staff goes. We've spoken to her, we've got nothing but positive feedback from everything that we have heard. And as I said, before we really start to do the training with the kids and before Mike starts to go to the assemblies and show these kids what we're supposed to be doing and have the teachers take responsibility for those young kids, we want to hold some forums or, you know, however we're gonna do it, to meet with the parents and explain to them, because there are some misconceptions about some of these training programs, like we're gonna be teaching the kids to, you know, attack, you know, someone who's coming into the school. That's not how these things work. So as I said, that's really why we're here.
Well, I commend A, for taking the initiative to identify all that we could potentially do to keep our kids safe and to already have pursued those training mechanisms. I also think it's really important to, especially with a small school like ours, where our community is very connected and there is that two-way dialogue, to do more than what the normal watered-down average might be for the nation. And so to potentially come up with a blended model that takes advantage of all the best practices and prepares our students in the best possible way, I love that idea. I would completely recommend that.
And I like your idea of sharing that with the community so that they're fully knowledgeable about what is going on and can, you know, dispel those myths that may be out there.
Yeah, I agree. Hopefully we can do that sooner rather than later, right, given the start of the school year. Just wanted to say thanks. Thanks for taking the initiative. Thanks for helping us out. It's, you know, it's unfortunate that we have to talk about these things. I think we'd be negligent not to.
Right.
So whatever we can do to keep the kids safe, thank you.
And I would agree. I actually want to thank you as well, because I'm always, I feel good when I hear updates of how active you guys are in the school. It makes me personally feel good knowing that you're there with our kids there. It's a good feeling. And I guess maybe because I am one of the new school committee members and I'm taught active training, whatever the terminology is at my work. We've gone through many courses where I work as well. So the one question I would have is, how are the teachers impacted and how are they able to recognize the needs of different students? So, you know, somebody in Hopkins is going to understand a different level than somebody in elementary school, and then somebody in elementary school that's in 6th grade is going to understand different than kindergarten and, you know, a typically developing student versus a special needs student. So I guess my only concern would be, which I 100% agree with using these very techniques that are going on in the country, but just having the teacher weigh in or being able to recognize that different students, you know, especially the younger ones or those with special needs who might not really comprehend, ensuring that they really understand the safety behind it. And I'll speak just from my own experience. My son is very young still, but, you know, when they're little, that level of understanding is, you know, is limited. You know, it's all very black and white, and you know, they might not fully comprehend in the sense that they might be completely terrified or they don't want to come to school because they're afraid of what they're learning, or they might think it as something they see on TV and it might be like an exciting, you know, I mean, kids all learn differently. So I guess my only question would be, how is it tailored for students, older versus younger, ones with more comprehension, less comprehension? That's my only
And I'm
question
sure,
about it.
I'm gonna allow you to answer that, Chief, but just to provide some background that's important. Where we're at so far is that last year, we were very grateful, public safety came out, and I believe it was one of our professional development days in the spring with our faculty, and both police and fire were out there and started bringing faculty through response and did a wonderful overview. So students were not involved at all at that point. But I also want to remind those school committee members, or I may never have brought it to your attention, frankly, which our public safety go above and beyond. So they'll give you the technical answer to how Alice takes into consideration developmental differences in terms of cognitive development or age.
Sure.
But I would say they recognized that way before Alice. And so the first year I was here, and the second year, both chiefs and our officers have gone into, especially into classrooms where children may not see the world as some of their peers do, where children may be extremely anxious, and made sure that they introduced themselves in their uniforms to those children, not at the time of a drill. And one of the ways that I can see that that's made a difference is, as I said, well, we had a community that was up in arms about the presence of officers anywhere near the school. Our kids were shoving all of their hawk wings so they could be thrown in the back of the cruiser, right? So that they absolutely, I mean, that was just very anecdotal but real evidence that they see them as friendly faces, but that was done in a very purposeful way. So outside of any drills, they've gone in, they've introduced themselves, they've talked about their uniforms, they've sat with children who are nervous or upset, even after, when we had a drill, an alarm went off and the children went out. Actually, you were so responsive, Chief Spanknagel, made sure we have blankets now in the buckets because it was cold out, and one of our students really struggled, and Lieutenant McKenna, I said, could you please come and sit with this, and with this young person, and it wasn't just Lieutenant McKenna. So they all came over, we're your friend, and so that's just in our context. Now, I'm sorry, I'll allow you to, I don't know if Alice takes that into consideration, or it's different for different ages of children, or children with special needs, what that looks like.
So our plan is to model it with, as we've done with the fire side. So fire drills have been in the schools for forever. So kids, it's like a learned thing. The fire alarm goes off, they know it. If we have children that have some sort, they get really hyped up or nervous, or we have some runners, as we know. What we've done is we've pulled them in where they're actually coming with us to be a part of that fire alarm drill. So they stay with us, so they can actually see how it works from our eyes as to what we're looking for. So they're not so nervous. Another example, for example, today we had both sped buses for the first time over to the fire station. And we've never done an evacuation drill on a special ed bus. And you know, we need to know, the same thing could happen to a special ed bus. The different scenario is you have one bus driver trying to handle all these kids that need to be in a pretty controlled environment. A lot of them may be in wheelchairs, whatever, and how are they gonna manage that? So we've started putting together a protocol on that, and in speaking with Mike today, in an effort to keep kids from getting nervous, they'd like to see us come out first, so we're gonna start a program where probably this guy and maybe myself or Lieutenant McKenna will start riding the bus with them. Every so often we'll sit on the bus, do the ride, we can start getting used to them, they can start getting used to us. So if something happens and we show up in some more stressful situation, that they won't be so excited. Nick is putting together even some strapping for us right now with some loops on it so the kids can hold on to it. So when they get off the bus, they're all together and they feel like they're a group working together. And so we have all this stuff that we do annually. Mike, when Mike became the chief, he came on board right away because we've been working very closely as public safety versus police and fire. So he's been coming out to our 911 trainings when we teach the kindergarten kids how to dial 911. And it's a real hit because they're not just seeing a firefighter, but they're seeing a police officer. And so they're getting all the different looks of who's gonna be there. We get dressed up in our gear. Mike brings his riot gear so they can see that. They can touch it, they can feel it, they can put it on. So it makes them more comfortable around us. And I think that's the method that we're gonna use, obviously, for the younger kids. Again, with the folks that get really, really upset with this, it's gonna be a little bit more of a challenge, but it's something that we can't leave behind. We're gonna have to manage for it. So if an incident does occur, we still have to be able to get everybody to a safe place. And you know, the plan for the Alice program, there's a lot more than just the initial 5 minutes of a potential active threat situation. It's what we have to do after that. So getting all the kids to a safe place and reunification and all this other stuff. So we have a lot to do with that, and we have a really good foundation right now. It's just that you know, buy-in from you is the biggest thing for us to, start getting that word out to the parents that we're doing it, because it is a very scary thing. But as you've seen in the past, how successful, how many, we have next to no fires in schools now and no fatalities because of that education and training that they put in because of some really bad situations. So that's the plan of how we would move forward with that.
Yeah, the principles are all pretty much the same. A lot of this is we're going to have to. That's one of the reasons why we would like the buy-in from you folks and from the staff, is because a lot of this requires us to rely on staff. We have to rely on the teachers to be able to make these decisions for these young kids and for kids with special needs. That's why teaching these principles and practices to them first, and getting them to agree and accept that this is what we're going to do. Because obviously we can't teach, I also have young kids. And it's difficult for me because my kids go to 2 different schools right now because one of them's, he's in preschool basically. And it's difficult for me because they don't do this program just yet in their schools. So it's hard for me to, look at my 9-year-old daughter and say, if something were to happen, you can run right out that back door and go right to that next door neighbor who actually happens to be an Amherst cop, which works out well for me. But it's difficult because if the staff isn't on board with that, it's going to be hard with one kid running. So yeah, to answer your question, we're going to steal the tried and true practices of the fire department that they've been doing for years and years. We're going to make ourselves as accessible as possible. The idea is to let them see us as much as possible in cool, calm, and collected situations with friendly, smiling faces, so that if and when something happens, we have that trust built up with them. And Mike is right. Some of it is going to be a challenge, but we're not going to let that get in the way.
You guys have my full support, and I really appreciate your proactive approach with how you operate and how busy your schedules are and knowing your staffing. So I really appreciate the proactive approach in this one.
Just to go off of your question a little more, the ALICE program specifically has different age group trainings, presentations for each, exactly what you asked, to go, whether it's a high school level, middle school level, elementary and down, as well as training for the staff members and instructors. That said, we're going to do a blend of enhanced lockdown. We'll take a little bit from ALICE, as much as we can reasonably do since it's proprietary. But yes, there's very specific training for that, for children with special needs. It's all kind of worked into the program.
And you have my full support as well, but I do have one additional question. So there are some students that in the past have either received prior warning for fire drills or like while there were lockdown drills had no clue what was going on. They weren't really even involved with it. Is this something that will take those kids and make them actually more actively aware of what is going on?
We can only hope that's where we're headed. That's one of the reasons why working with Annie has been so refreshing for us, because if I say that to her, she's going to make sure that those kids are full participants. I can guarantee you that. But yeah, we would hope that every staff member that is working in any capacity within a school and every student that is in that school has at least some idea either to follow the instructions of their teacher or the teacher themselves making the right decisions. We want full participation and full buy-in. That's why we're taking it one step at a time.
I think too, the more we make this part of the culture, part of the school culture, the more available we are, the more presence we have in this school, the less likely that'll be a problem. So you'll see me in the schools more often. We'll most likely be doing more of these drills as soon as we work out the logistics and roll this out with the fire department. So there'll be more of a presence, and I think naturally, as a result of us being here more, the culture's going to change a little bit. At least that's the hope. So
To build on that, I would say that let's hope that nothing ever happens, right? Of course, the odds of something happening are very slim. But as a byproduct, I imagine that every student will feel a sense of ownership over the safety of their own selves, but also their classmates and their school, and see themselves as an integral part of that safety, perhaps even beyond the school. So I like the idea of not just hiding and waiting for something to blow over, but rather being smart about what's going on around them.
That is literally one of the tenets of these programs that come out. It's one of the most important principles that they have is taking some ownership over what is happening.
Also building better relationships between our children and future citizen adults and the police. I mean, we all know we can have improved relationships across the country in that regard.
I could actually get to that.
Yeah.
We've had classrooms as young as 4th grade in some of the schools that we work with where the teacher had stepped out of the room for whatever reason at the moment a drill was called. Kids have picked up the ball and run with it and done exactly, drawn blinds. In that particular school with the 4th graders, they had to fold over another door to cover that door. They did all of that beautifully. They were quiet, so they really do internalize it. They're watching, they're learning, and it's not, I understand your concern with children who may need to be pulled aside. There's not quite the sensory input with the lockdown drill. I think it's scarier to us as adults because we know why we're doing it. But with the children, there's less of the sensory inputs than a fire alarm. We've seen very little issues with it at the schools that we work with. It's actually gone remarkably well. And as these folks are already doing, a lot of that I think comes down to getting to meet the kids beforehand. Reading a book if that's what they want to do. Coming in and doing a little show and tell and answering questions to the children ahead of time. I think it's really gone a long way towards minimizing the challenges to the children.
And in that vein, I would be curious, some of the schools, they're commonly referred to as Chapter 766 schools, or private schools, where public education students attend private out-of-district placements. So some examples are the May Institute in West Springfield. I'm curious if they do these kinds of drills and how they account for that, because the majority of their student body, all of their student body, would have limited to no tolerance for sensory chaos, and some would have severe problems around that. So I wonder if, I can certainly identify for you where some of those schools are located, and I'd be curious if, for example, West Springfield Police Department is at all involved with the May centers in there, and they just might, they may have some interesting things that they've learned that they're doing them in schools where the majority of the population and some students may have, you really would have to think creatively.
Well, thank you. I think I'm hearing overwhelmingly you have our support in moving forward with this, and appreciate your time in presenting the information and the approach and the sensitivities around that in terms of the students' needs, the faculty's needs, and the communities. So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And just before you get up, the reason the word capital plan is near them, and we're going to talk about the capital plan later, but we're not going to go into detail around recommendations, but just tonight, there's an update of the capital plan that incorporates some of the recommendations you made last time. I would say we're still not quite ready to vote on it, because I was hoping in a general way that public safety officers went through both schools, and they did a very detailed list recommending security enhancements. I believe that when that occurred, I sent it on email to the school committee. It would not be a part of a packet because it would be executive session information, because it has to do with school security. And I'm so grateful for law enforcement for reminding me of that as I was preparing to put it in the packet for this evening. Thank you, Officer Romano. So as I said, we'll just put it in there. But in a general way, the school committee, if they were to be thinking about, and you can say we really need to get back to you, but any kind of ballpark around the not specific types of security, but maybe type of money that they'd want to put in their capital plan. If you are thinking back through capital, meaning some of the bigger ticket items that we talked about, I'm sure they come right to your mind. Or like I said, we can work together outside of here and we can put input in a general way. But you can certainly give voice to the fact that there are capital improvements pertaining to safety that you've recommended.
Absolutely, Mike and they've assisted with that in going through all the schools and putting that list together. If you would like, we don't have it in front of us, but if you'd like, we certainly could put together some type of a ranking list, so to speak, as far as those recommendations go. I've gone through the list and they're all important. Let's be honest, they're for kids. But yeah, we can certainly put together some priority based lists for you.
It sounds like there's some overall bottom line ballpark that we know what we will be earmarking.
And certainly if you're aware of those, or you can direct us to places where we might get general quotes around to, we would ask for to do that kind of work.
So last year, I met with the safety teams of both schools, both public schools, and we did prioritize it somewhat. You know, a rough draft, if you will. We looked at expense versus need. I think if we sat down again this year, as we've already started to implement some of these suggestions, I think if we sit down and decide what we really want to do for this year and the years to follow, we could probably quote it out and get a better idea. Some of these are big ticket items, very helpful, but others are equally as important, and they're not going to quite break the bank doing them. So, like I said, we've got probably half a dozen things that have already been accomplished so far, and it's just a matter of getting together with the safety teams, with you guys, and getting the vote and approving the you know, the items on the list as we think they're necessary.
And what we would probably do for that, so you're clear about what it is when you talk about specific security measures, so you have almost like an expanded or annotated capital plan that we would review in executive session. School safety and security measures are protected under executive session. Those documents do not need to be released to the public. That's one of the reasons you can call executive session and keep those documents under executive session. And then for the capital plan that goes to the town, we would just kind of summarize those in a more general way. So perhaps we can get together. You did do a great job of doing some prioritizing, and you've actually already taken steps to do some of the things that felt a bit like lower hanging fruit to get those taken care of. We could update that and then maybe arrange for you all to be at an executive session where you can go into more detail about those things. That would be great. Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so I dropped off a revised version of it. I actually have a couple of rows hidden on the one you got that kind of came out now, so use the paper version instead of the one that was emailed to you. And I guess I saw it was a little further on, but I can just kind of address the air conditioning project as part of the capital plan. You can see that was one of the rows that was actually hidden because I'm like, oh, well, we're done. But sadly, no, we're not. The one bid we got was for $513,000. We had $400,000 allocated for it, so so, you know, we can't do that project. There are a couple of things that were kind of brought to light to us. One of them is, you know, because we were unable to start before the beginning of the school year, it seems that the project would be more expensive to bid on because of two reasons. One, they would be working second shift and they'd have to wait for the kids to get out of school. That requires a premium salary to those who work the second shift. And the additional item would be the fact that, you know, they'd kind of be taking down ceiling tiles, running wire and ductwork and everything, and then they'd have to put everything back together every day so that it'd be presentable to the students the following day. So what the firm who did the specs for us and the plans told me was that he could easily see something coming in the $40,000 less range just because of those items alone, which would put us, you know, around $470,000 to $480,000, still above the amount that we had budgeted. So, you know, at this point in time, it's really up to you guys to let me know if, you know, this is something that you would like to have me let the town know that we won't be going forward with this as far as their, you know, borrowing plans, and possibly going for the remainder amount in an upcoming town meeting to make up the difference. So I was also told that, I mean, we only got one bid. Part of the issue from what the engineers heard from vendors is that a lot of them are really tied up with the MGM project in Springfield, and they're just not looking for work at this point in time. That is also why we could only get one firm to do the engineering. We got the same answer from others that we reached out to, and that is, we're really tied up with the project right now, so we just can't. So, you know, with that, it seems that, you know, maybe going out to bid again after the first of the year and looking to get this done next summer might be something that we'd be able to pull off. But again, you know, I'm looking to feedback from you to kind of let me know which direction to go.
What's the timeline on the MGM project? Because I believe that it's going out pretty far, so I'm not sure if we get more bids if we wait.
Yeah, I guess a lot of it depends on when the air conditioning type work is actually done in the project. I mean, it certainly wouldn't be when the finished work is being done, but, you know, I mean, I have to be honest, I don't know where the project stands and how far along something like the running of the ductwork and everything is in the project. That I just don't know.
I can tell you the bricklayers are still down there every day. That's where Tom Johnson was today, so that's.
Chris, can you time this so that it falls over winter break? It's not ideal, because we were hoping to have it up in the fall, but that's a couple of weeks when we're closed, and maybe we could get regular shift workers to install it in winter.
It's possible, but doubtful. We still don't have enough money even with regular shift workers. You know, $400,000, the bid was at 513, so, I mean, even if they were to drop it, you know, for that amount, like the engineer said, well, you could probably get 40,000 less. That still puts us 80,000 or so over budget.
So, what's the option there? Is that going back to fall town meeting and asking to augment the funding by 80,000?
That would be
And
one of the options.
Trying to get it done in the winter, trying to get it done over budget?
Yeah, I mean, it also, it depends, that might be a good time because I don't think there's a lot of people putting air conditioning systems in December.
Exactly.
So would that be something that's done though after hours still? So if we're looking at augmenting the money from, I'm just saying like if, or is this still something during school break? Like is it gonna make it, does it make a
Well, if
difference?
it's during the Christmas/New Year holiday break, then it could be during the days.
Right.
So it would omit the need
would-
for sanction.
I think that would be less expensive.
I still think we should, so, help me understand, we did get an estimate before, and it was closer,
It was a very rough estimate and it was from several years ago. And I mean, that's part of the problem, quite honestly, with the capital plan in general, even with the girls' locker room remodel. The plans and the estimate are both from 2009, both of which at this point are probably,
I thought you'd gotten a newer estimate, Chris, I thought it was just a year old, so,
no,
you didn't talk to anybody.
no.
So I'm wondering if we could push to try to get more bids. It seems, I hate to go on a sample size of one,
Mhm.
right? And is there a way to do that, to augment that? I don't know what the rules are that how we bid it. Is there any flexibility about how we bid it that'll attract more bidders? Do they have to be DCAM certified? Is that a rule here?
Uh,
I know that
I
was
was
your-
told that they do have to be DCAM certified. It's kind of a fuzzy area because DCAM certified would be for a building and then any remodeling, installations, which I assume this would be kind of an installation, it would need to be DCAM certified. I did reach out again to the firm who did the plans and just said, you know, this seems a little fuzzy. Does it really have to be DCAM certified? They have not gotten back to me yet on this, but, you know,
I know that significantly increases the cost. I'm wondering if there's, since that is gonna be $100,000 question potentially, or maybe, is there an authority with the state where we can ask?
I might be able to reach out to someone at the state. I don't know if it necessarily increases the cost, but it decreases the amount of people who will bid on it, which I
That's
guess
true.
in theory could increase the cost. So, yeah, I have reached out to them just to kind of double check. I researched the law myself and, you know, like I said, they called it any vertical project and they considered vertical to be a building. And, you know, then they had the whole list of rebuilding, all kinds of stuff like that. And one of them was installations, so I'm assuming, again, you know, they're not real clear. Installations, what does that mean? You know, to me, installations, they're installing AC, but, you know,
Could vertical installations be considered something that is, you know, a multi-story building? And
No,
this is a
it's-
one-story.
as long as it's going up apparently, because they specifically excluded bridges, tunnels, sewage, which seems to be the anti-vertical, kind of, you know, below ground. So, that was my first thought too, was, oh, good, well, we're one story, I guess we're not vertical, but the next question was, or, you know, you had like the frequently asked questions. One was, it told us that any kind of vertical project, the second question was, what is a vertical project? Thank you, I said, and read it and said, okay, well, you know, it doesn't matter that it's multi-story, one story would be sufficient to make it that.
I've just heard enough stories, and of course these are all stories, second, third hand, of installations happening. I know Frontier, I think, just had air conditions put in, 8
Mhm.
rooms, less than $100,000, not DCAM certified. So, but you know, you hear that stuff all the time,
Mhm.
right? And so it'd be good to just track it down.
Actually, I work in Mount Greylock too on Thursday this week, and they are building a new school right now, so I can even ask, you know, the contractors there, just to see who's doing the AC, and, you know, I'll ask that question to them.
You know, two things that I heard that would probably be, that might be useful ideas that could bear fruit is you can ask, you can also probably use the Association of School Business Officials listserv, like identify business managers who would have done the procurement, perhaps on those jobs.
Sure.
And so use the ASBO listserv, and then idea of asking the state, going to the, who runs 30B? I forget, who's that? Procurement is under the Inspector General's office. Okay.
Sure, yep.
So it sounds like by doing that, we might be able to come up with
That would increase
New-
competition.
a new way to put out bids that, or an RFP that might want more competition, maybe a lower dollar amount.
Yeah, I mean, for the electrical portion, we got 5 bids, so that went pretty well, and it was quite a range too. They ranged from, I think, 99,000 to 186. And, you know, they all had the same specs, so,
It's quite a
you know,
bit.
they had to adhere to those. And so obviously, you know, the way the bid was written was that the low bid on the electrical portion would automatically go, you know, and fall underneath whoever got the low bid for the air conditioning portion, and they would be the general contractor and would, you know, kind of supervise the electrical portion of it. And so 5 bids for that, and I'm thinking, oh, great. But when it came time to open the bids for the AC portion of it, which was the following week, we sent out a lot of plans. I would say, 12 or more sets of plans on it. And when 2 people showed up, well, my first thought was they were from different companies, and I said, oh, this is great. And then I went downstairs to get everybody else to come up to my office to open, and kind of was met with an empty room. And then when I found out that the 2 people were both from the same company, I'm like, oh, God, I mean, you know, again, one bid is really kind of tough.
Especially when you have so much disparity with the electrical bids. Now,
Right.
does the 513 include the electrical bid then?
That includes it, yes,
Okay.
yeah.
So the 413 or whatever it is, 414 includes engineering and installation of actual HVAC system.
By engineering, the engineering is are you talking about like the plans and everything?
Yeah.
Those were already done.
Oh, they are.
That was $18,000, so that kind of comes off the 400,000.
Okay.
So we have 382 left.
Okay.
And again, so, you know, we're looking at about a shortfall of give or take $100,000, you know, based on the guess, of course, that if we did it during normal hours where they didn't have to clean up every day, you know. That's why I had put 125 in here, just as kind of a safety net to say, okay, well, if we get 125, that should, you know, certainly be enough to cover us. But I will certainly look into all those other things and, you know, see if something can be worked out.
If you go back out to bid, is the electrical part of it kind of reopened then?
Boy, that's a very good question. I don't know the answer to that. I mean, I would love to just keep the one we got.
Right,
I can find that out.
check that
Yeah,
out.
well, sure, that's fine.
Okay, so that's the first item on here. So Annie, we needed to go through, we were revisiting this overall 5-year plan, capital plan, to be sure that we've represented all of the different priorities that we had in mind. Okay,
So I wanted to make sure that we got the feedback you gave us last time correctly.
yeah,
We'll go back on the air conditioning and also next phase, try to sort out some of the security upgrades that aren't on here. So we have the girls' locker room, and I know that we were very clear that we're looking to put that on May meeting. But as Chris pointed out, it would be paid for, oh no, we did move it into 17-18, even though it'd be paid for in fiscal year 19. Even though they voted in fiscal year 18, if they voted at the May meeting, it's not going to actually be paid for until the following fiscal year. He updated the air conditioners, athletic fields, phase 2.
So just to be clear,
Yeah.
this goes out, air conditioners, that 125. Do we need one, why don't we hold off putting that on until we have a
Okay.
better numbers?
Sure.
Let me check that. The girls' locker room, we said we would get better figures closer to the Maytown meeting, so that would be reflected there.
I just have a
Yeah.
question on that too. We have that whole roll of blueprints that were drawn up again 8 years ago. You know, my question is, should we get new ones of those made? I'm assuming codes have changed significantly since then. You know, those plans that were done in 2009, I suppose we can have somebody look at them first, but they may or may not be relevant anymore either, which, you know, you hate to go in with these plans and then have everybody tell you, we can't do this, you know. Let's see if we
Especially
can
given
find
the
something to
timing
take
of
a
this,
look.
I would hate to be off by, like, because I'm assuming we're bringing this forward to a tri-board discussion and the bigger picture, financial picture of the town.
Yeah.
And that if this 400,000 ask is in reality 600 because
Yeah,
our
it could
plans
very well
are
be,
dated,
yeah.
I'd rather know that,
Yeah.
you know, earlier,
Mhm.
because it may not be a reality for the coming year.
Okay.
Okay. So we'll perhaps have somebody just take a look at the plans as they exist and make the
Mhm.
determination about whether or not they need to be reviewed. Athletic fields phase 2 is to be determined because we focused on phase 1, which would be, I think had fallen off. It was
Yep.
in the 16-17. We kept the serving lines, the resurfacing of the parking lot, we pushed out. That was the recommendation of the school committee, so that
Sync up with the fields
Mhm.
being done.
a full-size bus replacement we brought in earlier, right? Moved out the
That's correct,
resurfacing
yeah.
and we made sure that happened earlier. The grease traps still are where they are. And the tech upgrades, now I know, Chris, you were talking with Mike, I don't have detail on what,
I have detail, it was just, it didn't really work putting it into a report.
Okay.
But I can list them off to everyone if they'd like them.
I think this is our best estimate, but we do have some detail.
Yeah, I can, would you like
Did that come
just
from
details?
the tech committee or from like that?
It came from Mike, yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. I don't need to know that.
I don't either.
Okay, that's fine.
We are striving for one-to-one, is what we're
Yeah.
headed towards. Good.
Yeah.
One-to-one, somewhere in one of the years was to get Chromebooks to a one-to-one, yes.
It would be helpful at some point to know what year we think that
Mhm.
might happen.
Yep. There's some in year one, add 2 carts of Chromebooks and HES. Year 2, add second Chromebook cart to HA. 3 and 4, no. And then 5 is replacing the oldest Chromebooks in the district and increasing count of Chromebooks, to provide one-to-one in HA. That would be another 75 needed, so
That's the 21-22 year.
that's
So
correct,
that's the
yes.
response to.
In the 5th year, we'd hit 1-1 and have replacements.
Okay.
Yep.
So this is not for vote tonight, obviously, there's more to do, we're just keeping you apprised of the progress. And then the next piece in the packet was in response to a question, there was some discussion, so what happened in Beston when you were talking about the girls' locker room? And there were questions from folks, what has been updated? Yes. So, and I did not get the answer to the question of when it was built. Well, I did, and now I can't recall that question.
I think 1964 is.
The
what
most
Jeff had
recent
said. Yeah,
Built
yes.
was 1964.
Mhm.
Yes, we did get the answer. I was too busy regaling Dee with the tale that I turned around and looked at Tara as though she would know. She graduated from here.
We need another 2009.
Yeah, a lot got done that year.
Is that air on there? Some sort of
I don't
supplement?
think so. That wasn't, recovery, because that wouldn't
No,
have
I don't
been
think it
an
was.
approved use of that.
I think
I feel
this
like
was just
the social-
MSBS.
Oh, it was MSBA
I
money?
mean, MSBA, excuse me, what's that?
So that's the
Mass
Mass
School
School Building Authority, and I also talked about providing you with some information on MSBA programs, but I spoke quickly with Heather about this, and I'd also contacted the MSBA. And really what they'd be looking for, as you guys are sifting through this, is their focus is more, so decide what you want to do. It's better to decide what your priorities are, and then determine what funding sources are available than trying to fit your desires into a funding stream. It's really, it just makes more sense to say, this is what we're trying to do. What, if any, programs would this project qualify for?
I was gonna ask about the boys' locker room, because in a prior meeting, we cited that had
Yeah.
been renovated,
Yeah.
you know, and the girls' locker room had not, but I don't see it on here.
I spoke with Jeff, actually, about this, and apparently the only work that was done in the boys' locker room was asbestos removal. It was not a remodel,
That was
is
nice
what he
of us
had
to do
said,
that.
so, yeah.
Okay.
So both the locker rooms are in equal condition?
Not even close.
So are we saying that when we built the school, we invested more heavily?
I'm not saying that you did that, although as alarming as that sounds now, Title IX wouldn't have, Title IX even have been passed when we built the school. So it's not acceptable, but it's not shocking to me that boys' athletics would be treated differently in the 1960s, even in the 1970s. Title IX didn't happen until 1972. They would have been treated differently. Again, not saying that's okay, but it would be shocking today and illegal for somebody to go out and do that, but probably more commonplace than they would want to think.
Is it perhaps more probable that it just goes back earlier than 2009, and therefore we don't know when those upgrades would have taken place, somewhere between 1964 and 2009?
I mean, you know, I can't rule it out, but when I spoke with Jeff about it, he said that they were actually the original lockers and everything, and I mean, even the condition of the lockers, I mean, it's pretty impressive that they're, you know, 60-year-old or, you know, almost 60-year-old lockers that look that good, so I don't really know what the thing is. To be honest, I think part of it could have been some kind of ventilation issue. There's a lot of rust on the girls' lockers and the heaters, and I think that, you know, there's showers in the locker room, and I think that maybe it was just a ventilation issue where the moisture was staying in there and just kind of attacked the, you know, any metal surface quicker than maybe the boys' room just had better ventilation to get it out.
Okay. So next steps on this, we want to get an executive session for public safety items. We're going to revisit the air condition options. Get some kind of more current girls' locker room take, just so we
Yeah.
have a, you know, more accurate
It is
read on
needed.
that. Did I miss anything?
No. I think that's what we're talking about.
Okay. Great. All right. Presentation item D, tiered systems of support.
Yes, so in your packet, I know it's much harder for you to see these, but I will tell you, because you don't have color in your packets, I will tell you, if you're looking at it online, you might be able to see it. So what I'm about to take you through are the changes in student scores on a literacy measure called the Basic Literacy Skills Dynamic, and I forget what the second letter is, but it's an assessment of basic DIBELS, the basic early literacy skills, early basic literacy skills. And so this is where at Hadley Elementary School, we've invested in something called tiered systems of support. So right at the start of the school year, teachers go in, they assess literacy skills, particularly those skills that are indicative of whether or not a student will be on target, at grade level, at the next benchmark. How likely are they to be where they should be in terms of their literacy development by the end of the year? And there's all kinds of tests that are included in DIBELS. It depends on the age of the student, it depends on their developmental level. So in for some ages, rhyming is incredibly important, or nonsense words, so you're not reading by sight, you're actually using phonics to decode. So there's a host of assessments, they occur grades K through 4, and they differ slightly depending on the developmental level of the student. We made a decision a few years ago, the school committee made a decision to dedicate 2 educational support professionals as interventionists that work with these small literacy groups. So there was a financial investment in the budget that the school committee recommended, and we also invested in terms of time. We had teachers and a principal from a district and a school that was doing this with good results and successfully. We had them come down and visit us. Our teachers went up and visited them. We also release teachers 3 times a year for days in which they look at student achievement data and student growth data. So it's important, I think, to tell you and to tell the public, when we make an investment like that, so we invest in a teacher, we invest in more staff, we change our schedule, so what? What's the return on investment? Now that we've done this, what's happening for children? And I'm giving you these big broad strokes, and I'm focusing on something called the DIBELS composite score, which is the score at each grade where they say these are the measures that are most important. And when you add all these measures together, you get a DIBELS composite score. When you look at each grade, so when you look at kindergarten, for example, in the first slide, if you're not looking at it in color, what you want to pay attention to is the top of the bar graph. So on that bar graph, the top, if it's in color, it's in green. And what that tells you is that if a student is in green, that they are 90% or above usually likely to be on target for meeting their next literacy benchmark. So they are going to do just fine in just a regular, universal, general education, whole group environment. They should do just fine. And so what we try to track is at benchmark 1, and it gets harder, right? So there's a fall. We don't expect students to be as skilled in the fall as we do in the spring, so it gets progressively more difficult. That statement makes more sense when you look at the line graph. And so we can see in kindergarten, and kindergarten is always really tricky, but we did see the group of students, big group of students at the start of the year that were on target to meet literacy goals. And about a quarter of the class is that the bottom part says, without some serious interventions, it's unlikely that they're going to meet their literacy targets. So we see that green, that students who are on target look like it shrinks in the middle. Again, not terribly surprising because things get more difficult, but then at the end of the year, we have a larger group of students who are on target, and we see that bottom group that really was destined to need a whole lot of help has gotten a whole lot smaller. So that's great news. And in the next kindergarten slide, that's where I said that line graph shows you that the expectations get progressively more difficult because the line goes through, there's the top section that you're looking at would be green, and you see by the time you get to benchmark 3, that top section is smaller, right? Because fewer students are expected, it's harder. Right? It's harder. So if you have a score, in order to get a score in that green, your score has to be higher by the end of the year than it would have to be at the beginning of the year. Does that make sense? And so we are looking to have, DIBELS says, if your aggregate composite we want it to be at goal or better. And we see in kindergarten, we are at goal in benchmark 3, that those students that had a positive impact. And similarly in first grade, they did a great job of moving students to a place where they were on target to meet literacy goals and shrinking that group of students. It was almost 50% of the first grade. This is last year in the fall, and by the end of the year, that was down from 47, just over 47%, to about 21%. So they shrunk that significantly and grew that group of students who were on target. And you see the benchmark 3 aggregate DIBELS composite score for grade 1 in benchmark 3. The goal is 155, and the first graders were at 201. So they were way above that expectation. For our second graders, we saw great growth. I mean, they started right on target, but we see a lot of really great movement in first grade. So kudos to the second grade teachers, and they really do seem to come into second grade prepared from their first grade experience. Same thing happens. Few students in that bottom tier on the bar graph, but even fewer by the end of the year, and the group that's on track has grown. And the second graders, holy guacamole, second graders. I mean, no wonder they're out writing petitions about recycling to these kids can read and write. Their benchmark 3 goal was 238, and they were at 330.5 in benchmark 3. And for our third grade, we see a slight shrinking in the students, the group that's on target, and kind of a flatlining of the group that needs intensive support. We want to look at that. We also know, and thank you, so I believe in telling our community that this is an example of where we use student achievement data. I know you weren't looking at this specific data. We've looked at other data last year, and you heard from parents. But this is an example of where we make investments based on student needs. So this is a class in which we invested in another teacher, right? So you're not seeing the growth in this class that you saw in any of the other classes, except maybe kindergarten. You don't see massive growth in kindergarten, but developmentally, children are all over the place. Like one day they're reading One Piece, the next day they're playing Play-Doh. Okay, maybe it's not that extreme, but it's really, they're all over the place, right? And, but still third grade, their benchmark 3 goal was 330, and they were at 389.1, so they were above, but we really want to hit the ball out of the park with growth, so we made an investment. So this was to demonstrate for you how the investment that you've recommended and made, and that we continue to make, it's important to taxpayers that we say, okay, when we go out and do something, do we evaluate its impact, and then do we ask ourselves, are we still getting the intended results? Do we continue to invest, or do we change strategy? And I would argue that we are getting the results that we want. But we're never satisfied, so this year, we were given the opportunity to participate in a very large national research study being run by the University of Minnesota. And we will still use these kinds of frequent assessments and progress monitoring to make sure that we get the students the help that they need if it looks like they're not on track. But we're part of something called the Fast for Success project. The University of Massachusetts Amherst is also a part of this project. So what this will give us is a new assessment tool. We won't be using DIBELS, we'll use something called FAST. The assessments are much quicker to administer, so that's great. They're online, wonderful. They're adaptive. So depending on how a student is doing, the questions, the difficulty in the questions start to change. So this is adaptive online assessments. And in addition to that, today I was at the first one. We are being provided with in-depth professional development. We are training some of our staff and our teachers to run data teams. The FAST project has a whole suite of facilitating data team meetings. So essentially really helping people to look at data and say, what do we see? What does it mean? What do we do? And how do we know it made a difference? Getting them very good at that. So the professional development, the first year of using FAST, all the assessment is free. The next, in subsequent years, the cost should be, if we only did the grades that we're doing now, we should be able to, we would be able to discontinue using some of our other assessments. However, you won't see from me a recommendation of reduction in cost. This isn't cost prohibitive, but you won't see a recommendation because our goal, the other upside about FAST is DIBELS focuses on early literacy. FAST has mathematics and literacy and goes all the way to grade 12. We don't have anything at Hopkins right now. You don't see me bringing a lot of data like this from Hopkins because we don't have assessment tools that give us this kind of standardized formative feedback on students. So we're really enthusiastic about this. And that's just an update for student achievement, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
So I have a couple.
Sure.
So the FAST evaluation would take the place of DIBELS, so DIBELS would no longer be administered. Okay. DIBELS itself isn't an accurate measurement for all students.
Correct.
There are some students that don't participate in the DIBELS testing. Is that the same way with FAST? You know?
So I do know that FAST has we have been told by our research assistant at the University of Massachusetts that in fact, the adaptive nature of the test lends itself to being more suitable for a wider range of students. But what I will ask, that I haven't asked, is are there any disability categories for which FAST has been found to be unreliable or invalid? And we'll ask that question.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
How did we get on board of this as one of 7 sites across the country?
Because we are really fortunate that our school site, we miss our person that moved along, but the person whom we hired we have 2 great school sites. One of them happens to be a graduate, got her PhD at UMass Amherst, and so we had paid her.
Gotcha.
So she's connected to all the people at UMass Amherst. We also get 2 doctoral students who are helping us with this project, and it's helped us with UIS as well.
Great. Okay. Thank you
That's
for
what I mean
that.
about resourceful, by the way.
Yes.
What's that?
That's what I mean about resourceful. Great.
Great, thank
Okay,
you.
anything else on that?
Nope.
All right, last presentation, discussion item, personnel report, and special education administration.
Yes, so I want to make families aware that our special education coordinator has resigned. She's taken a position in Holyoke Public Schools. We are grateful for everything that she's done for us, and we absolutely wish her well. She's contributed greatly to our district last year. I want everyone to be rest assured, everyone in the district, particularly families of children with special needs, that we have Pat Bell, who's working with us 2 days a week, but also previously the assistant superintendent for special education and student services, will be here every day until we have a replacement. We've posted the position. People heard through the grapevine that it might be posted, so even before the posting, I already had inquiries and interest, and today we've had more. So I'm confident that we will fill the position with someone who is a very good fit for Hadley, for our families. That's really important to me. And I am grateful for what Ms. Seymour has done, and I'm certain that we're gonna find a quality candidate for the district.
Any concerns with the start of the new school year and kind of, activities that happen at the onset in terms of evaluations and other planning, or is with having Pat, expanding her time, do you feel like that's going to be able to meet the needs of, the demands of startup? I don't know all the particulars, but I can only imagine the start of a new year is a heavy.
Yeah, so it is, although again, this speaks, I really can't say enough about the work that Tammy did, Ms. Seymour did, particularly in terms of organization. So we started last year when Ms. Seymour came on board, scheduling out individual education plan meetings, annual meetings. I don't think we can do triennials all the way out, although we may try to do those as well, all the way out, a year in advance. Or some people say, how do you do that? It's like going to the doctor, come back in a year and hand you the card. It doesn't mean we can't be flexible, but that was to ensure that things weren't getting crunched at the end, that we wanted to make sure we didn't miss deadlines. So we have everything that we know about, we have scheduled right now. It can be subject to change. We have a schedule, we started working on that, not this past summer, the summer before. I got involved in doing the scheduling at Hadley Elementary, and that was really to make sure that students, that we were really taking into consideration that we had a seamless start, that we didn't waste any time on day one. Previously, and I'm very grateful for this, we had special education teachers who were doing a lot of the scheduling in terms of service delivery, which means they start looking at schedules today. They have a million other things to do, and it results, unfortunately then, in students waiting for services to start. And so having a schedule doesn't mean it doesn't, I know it needs to be tweaked. I'm meeting with them tomorrow, but we're in a much better starting place. So in terms of services being scheduled, I feel very good about that. All these things can be adjusted, but the baseline is there. Meetings are already scheduled. Ms. Bell, I'm grateful that Pat is there as a face because questions come up. We make sure that phone calls get answered. Melissa is great in the special education department as well. We want to make sure we are vigilantly responsive with our families to their every need and respond as quickly as possible. But I do feel good, and I I feel really good about the interest that we've gotten, that we were getting interest before the posting was even out, so.
So with the announcement that was made tonight, where should we expect parents to provide their communications? Previously, a lot of parents would provide it directly to Tammy
Yeah.
in email. Who should those be directed to?
Thank you for asking that question. They should go to Pat Bell. They can always, if, as parents know, in special education, in anything, they can always ask me a question, CC me. I would say in special education, it makes sense to start with Pat, but at any time a parent wants to ask me a question, I'm available. And I am gonna put that in the weekly email. I'm so glad you said that.
And still we have Melissa to.
Absolutely. And that's always good
Including those
to also copy Melissa on that. But I'm gonna put that in the weekly email. I'm glad you said that. And what we typically do, just when somebody leaves the district, is their email automatically gets assigned. So all the emails that are going to somebody, they don't just go into a void. They get reassigned to someone else, so Pat, or sometimes it's me.
So what is the timeline that you're looking at to hire the replacement for Tammy?
So we have it posted as open until filled, and so we would be looking to identify qualified candidates, and really as soon as we land a good fit. Now, one of the goals would be, this is a position that is like any other hire, is essentially, it's not a school committee hire, but the goal would be that because Pat is staying with us for another year, so once we have somebody on board, Pat would decrease back to the time that she has been, is to really try to attract people who may be interested in having more of a leadership position and have the opportunity to have about a year of mentoring. Now, I want to be very clear that I would not say or imply to any candidate that I have the authority to say, oh, this is a pipeline to a special education director job. I could say that if somebody demonstrates great leadership skills, that I can make a recommendation to the school committee, but that's a school committee approved hire. Really as soon as we have a competent, qualified, and a candidate who embodies the values that we talked about in terms of social justice, who clearly articulates the importance of recognizing the value and worth and dignity of every human being, somebody who understands that we don't just work with our families, we work for them. We work for them. And it's our responsibility to ensure that families feel every day when they send their youngster to school, and we want every family to feel this way, but if you're a parent of a child with special needs, the things that other people take for granted can feel like an uphill battle. Sometimes you don't get to take anything for granted. And so we want a candidate who understands that we have to seek to understand the perspective of our families and to meet their needs and anticipate them, not just meet them. When we find that person, they're working here.
And is there going to be like a hiring or interview committee?
Yeah, and I'm gonna talk to the staff about the best way to proceed with that and how they want to give input, given the time of year that it is. So I'm gonna talk with them about what makes sense. Let's lay out your priorities in terms of getting somebody on board. How do you wanna give that input? Is it about people being in an interview? Is it about people feeding in? I really want you to look for this, this, and this, so we'll make determinations then about the composition of the hiring committee process.
And there'll be parent involvement in that, like CPAC committee?
So depending on yes, the short answer is yes. What that looks like, that's open.
Good.
And thank you for saying the way that you said it.
You're welcome.
All right. Next, public comment period. Do we have any public comment? Okay, nope. Great, moving on. Business manager report. Well, we kind of talked about the air conditioning bid.
Right, yeah, that's, so we have the expense report.
Yeah.
Again, early in the year, there's really not a lot to report. I guess there's really just not a lot of excitement in this report, in the month of August.
Good.
0%
Yeah, I know,
used.
no excitement is typically
You know,
good news,
when I
yeah.
report, it is wicked exciting.
Yeah.
Like $400,000 in the
If
hole.
you
I
weren't
mean,
here,
you
you would
apparently,
be
you don't know how to give a report.
I will watch video of when you presented and take notes. I mean, if there's any questions, that's fine, but I mean, as you can see, we're a couple months into the year. I mean, when this report was run, we're about a month and 2/3 or something into the year, and we're pretty much in line right across the board. There are a couple of items that I'm going to check the encumbrances on, because sometimes when encumbrances are placed, they're placed on, you know, maybe prior year expenses, and sometimes they're placed on just the prior month expenses or something. Mary will look and say, oh, just say, you know, we paid $5,000 last month, I'll encumber 60 for the year. And what I'm going to do is go back, because I looked at some of the encumbrances and I'm like, I don't really think that's right, so.
Like
you know,
electricity at the.
Electricity, exactly, yeah. So there'll be a little bit of tweaking there. I mean, in the end, whether it's encumbered or not, really doesn't matter, but it does give a clearer picture on what's remaining to spend. I don't know if anyone has any questions on this particular report? Okay, next up, we have the grant report. No, we don't. There's no, you know, we haven't even gotten all the grants yet, certainly, and there's 0 expenses so far this year, so,
Easy.
you know. If you thought this report was dull, the grant report would be even worse. And the revolving accounts report, I tried, basically, is all I can say. I requested several times from the town accountant the balances for the revolving accounts. And I did actually get an email from him at 4:30 this afternoon. Unfortunately, I had left the office and I got it when I walked into here. And it was missing one of the accounts. I asked for the school choice account, both June 30th and July 31st, as you requested. That was not in the list of account balances he gave, and I wasn't really sure that the balances he listed were what I expected to see. So I sent several emails actually during the meeting already, to Jeff about the locker room and to him about the revolving account balances, just to check and see if certain transactions have been processed yet. So what I can do is email it out to you as soon as we actually get them ironed out, because I really hate to make you wait until next month. And we're gonna have to figure something out for these, because it's a challenge every month really to get them. And
Is it a timing thing, or what's?
I don't think so. I mean,
Suggestions
I know
about
that, I mean, because I also followed up with the town treasurer, just to see, hey, have the revenues been posted? Because I'm waiting to get these balances and I can't get them. And I know there was a delay in posting the revenues as well, so I don't wanna give you July 31st balances if they're missing all of the revenues that we received that month. But, you know, they were posted, I believe, last Wednesday, I think it was. And so Thursday morning, I again emailed out and I said, okay, so I heard that the revenues were posted, you know, when can I get the balances? And I was told that I'd have them Friday. And then I had a phone call this morning and I was told I'd have them by the end of the morning. And then that turned into 4:30 this afternoon. So, you know, it's just one of those things that I was chasing, and we are gonna have to figure out some way. I did speak with them this morning about possibly just giving me access, read-only, to the town site. So I can just go in and get it myself, rather than having to rely on anyone. And they were going to check with Vadar, who's the general ledger firm, just to see if we could give me access to that. So that might just be the ultimate solution, and I can just go in, look it up. To be honest, that would really just make life easier for me in general, because when I compare our expenses to the town side, and sometimes it has me scratching my head like, something's not right here. It'd be great if I could just go in and look up all the transactions on their side, rather than having to request them, you know? And then saying, okay, I'm looking at mine, I'm looking at theirs, oh, they've got this transaction, I don't, why is that, you know? That would make life, what's that?
It seems far more efficient.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah. So I'm hopeful that we can just get me that access, and then we'll have that report every school committee meeting right on time.
Great. Well, thank you for pursuing
Thanks,
that.
Chris.
Okay.
Moving on then to section 8, school committee reports and discussions. So first are negotiations with units. So we're gonna have a meeting coming up, Monday the 11th.
That's Unit A only, so I'm trying to remember, Unit A is Heather and Paul. So not, yeah, when your unit comes up, then, yeah, not a year's worth of fun. Mr. Burns, it is a year's worth of fun.
5 o'clock on the 11th. Okay, great. Policy, so Keith and I will be meeting again in September. I think we just have to settle on a date
Yep.
and time to review the next section of policies. So something for y'all to look forward to, first reads. Fun stuff. Okay, finance and tri-board. We were not able to be represented at the last tri-board meeting because of schedules and vacations, unfortunately, but we do have the next tri-board meeting coming up.
September 6th.
Yeah, I will plan on being there. I'm not on vacation, I am here. Yeah, I think that's the same night too, there's a parent athletics meeting here, so. that will
At
be it.
6, you said?
6 o'clock.
At 6 o'clock?
On the 6th, yep, 6 o'clock, before the select board meeting.
I may be able to make that as well.
So we wanna have just 2 of us represented there, so you guys should talk about who.
I have to double check because that day, depending on, I need to see if I can get there on time.
Okay. Sounds good. Anything else on finance or tri-board that we should cover? All right, fields. How's it going, Paul?
Eric?
I'm subject tonight.
Oh.
Versatility.
So we were supposed to be currently at a meeting with CPA, but they had to cancel and reschedule for September 11th at 7 p.m. So we let all the folks know that have been helping us out with the fields. We have a proposal into them for $400,000 to kind of do the major portion of the first phase. There's an additional estimated $115,000 that we've been working on a fundraising strategy for. Annie and Eric said they've been doing a great job.
We have sent out requests to indicate commitment from folks that have typically been very generous to the schools in the past, and we've heard some positive feedback, and one of the upsides to having it be September 11th will give people more time to, I doubt that we will get actual figures, but just an indication from some of the groups that typically support us that they are intending to provide monetary support. I also spoke with a gentleman from the Springfield Falcons today. He emailed me, this isn't a huge fundraiser, but everything matters. Recently, Belchertown High School, their music program, I think, made about just over $2,000 on this particular fundraiser. So we're looking to perhaps do a Hadley night at a Springfield Falcons game. Springfield Falcons, right? They're a hockey team. I am appreciative of their support. They are a hockey team and they are called the Falcons. Should have written that down before I got here. So we would they discount the ticket prices and then allow the group to take a portion of those ticket prices. And in some cases, they can also, depending, there are rules around this, but there is a potential opportunity to get a piece of the same kinds of things we do at our basketball games, like chuck-a-puck kind of fundraisers and other kinds of raffles. So every little bit helps there. Eric was going to be here tonight because he thought he was going from here to CPA, and to ask the school committee if you wanted him to discuss this with the CPA. So the Young Men's Club, there's an increased amount of urgency around this fields project. The Young Men's Club, where mostly in the summer season, it's mostly around baseball, softball, although sometimes with soccer, they provide fields for our students to practice on. They've done a lot of upgrades. They've always given us use of those fields for free. They are fantastic and helpful, and they're a great organization. They've done upgrades. Those upgrades have meant that people now want to book those fields, and they have an opportunity to make revenue. So last spring, we did what we always did. Thank you so much. We look forward to seeing you next year. And recently, when Eric contacted the Young Men's Club, they said, well, good news for us is we're pretty heavily booked in the fall. This won't create a problem for our practices. Eric has already developed a schedule, there's a workaround, students won't be, their athletic experience won't be compromised. But it does, again, kind of lend itself to a bit of urgency here that we can't, I don't want to say we can't rely on the Young Men's Club, it's a great organization, but they've been providing us this at no charge for quite a while, and they should and deserve to make money, so he's hoping that the school committee would be comfortable with him bringing that update to the CPA.
So might I add, just, it's, you know, it's a wonderful thing, they're a wonderful resource. I always thought it was unusual that my middle school son playing baseball would get on a bus and be bused from here to the Young Men's Club and then back. And so there's that additional expense as
Yeah.
well, it's not terribly efficient
No.
for students.
So if you're comfortable with that, I would tell Eric you should come to the CPA meeting with all of you. Okay. Great.
So I'm bummed that there is no CPA meeting tonight, because I will not be able to join you guys in the second grade and travel. So let me know if there's anything I can do.
Yeah,
for
thanks.
you.
Try to get out support, get people to come join us.
Yep, please.
Okay, Mara, CES?
So I think I reported at the last meeting that this is a meeting that takes place, a board meeting that takes place every other month, and last month was their on month, and I missed it for travel, but this next meeting, September 27th, will be.
Okay, and the additional item, a handful of us had a chance to attend the Mask Summer Conference out in Marlboro, yeah, and a nice short drive away, and attend a few of the sessions. I know Keith, Tara, Yanni and I went. Some of you guys were able to go Friday. I know I only went Saturday, but I thought it would be a good opportunity just to share a little bit about the types of things that we attended, topic-wise, and maybe some key takeaways. I know I'll just mention personally, Chris, I went to a session on finance, kind of beyond the basics, and
Yeah.
I'm in even more awe of the numbers that you're having to monitor from, day to day to day. But really some good dialogue, some good chances to network with other people from other districts that are facing different, larger problems, or just even topics, given the size of their committees or the size of their districts. What were your guys' key takeaways?
Yeah, I did one on Friday for goal setting, and so my immediate to that was, what are our goals? What do we have for goals? How often do we update them? What are we looking at? And one interesting thing that I really was intrigued by is they have the goals for the district, but then the school committee themselves has goals, realistic and attainable goals, but goals within the committee themselves. So I had kind of pondered, and I kind of talked with Heather on Saturday a little bit, what are our goals? Do we do this? And you had mentioned in the past there was a retreat or a get-together, am I correct? To kind of go over these things, and so I'd kind of wondered if, in the future that was something we'd talk about again, like what are not just the goals for the district, but, our goals within the committee.
Yeah.
So I found that interesting, and I did find out that a lot of other schools don't have goals either, so it intrigued a lot of conversation and a lot of ideas sparked. It was quite challenging to come up with just one goal. It took a lot of time, a lot of effort to write a really solid goal. So I did that, and then maybe I'll let you speak to.
Yeah, I unfortunately don't have my notes. I'm diligently trying to find one of the PowerPoints that is not up there. But so the first day of the ESSA, so it was a lot on the standardized testing and the latest version of what used to No Child Left Behind, and really talking about the faults in those programs, and trying to garner support for potential lobbying of congressionals and stuff once it's up for another rewrite. So trying to make sure that our federal and state laws actually help our students go forward as opposed to the testing's sake and for evaluation of educators as opposed to helping the students themselves. So that was a really interesting thing. That was the Friday session that I attended. The following day was it was billed as family engagement, family like a seminar on family engagement, and that ended up being instead it was actually on social emotional learning, which was fabulous. Yeah, and Annie was in on that one as well, and it was great. It was a great look at the whole child, and how to educate the whole child and different ways of communicating to children to help them strive to meet their grades.
The nice thing about that one in particular was having Annie there for some of the programs that we already have in place. It was nice to be able to glance over and have her go, yep, we do that, yep, we do this, we've got that covered, that kind of glance, like, we need to do this, we've already got that. So it was a real affirmation. And then the second part of that, that Keith and I had stayed for, I forget what it was called, addiction, it was on addiction, which I think fortunately is less applicable in our district, but I think in particular for me, it brought about an awareness that some of these school committees and just district staff, the concerns and worries that they have to think about in regards to addiction, not only for parents of children and overdose, but for children themselves. One nurse, I can't remember where she was out of, they were out of Middlesex County, and the nurse executive there just commenting on overdose of students in the district and how they handle those, the hardships, the stress, how do you handle these emotional balance of other students impacted and those students impacted. And for me, it was kind of an emotional listen to all this and to listen to how many students and how they handle behavioral impacts for students who have parents of overdose and what those parents, what those staff at the school need to provide to those students in social and behavioral awareness to them. Not every student is coming to school, and this kind of came out in the social awareness. Every student is coming to school as ready to go as another student. What happened 10 minutes before, 30 minutes before, an hour before, and really looking at that. So it was really, I feel thankful for where we're at, but it was an eye-opener to hear some of the struggles that some of these districts are going through.
Yeah, the DA from Middlesex was one of the presenters for that, and was talking about students who the one story of the student whose mother who watched her mother overdose and die, and then was sent to school the next day.
Young child.
So these are the things that our students are walking through the doors with that the building staff have to be prepared for. You don't know what the children went through before they walked through the door, and that came up both in the social emotional and the addiction.
Really interesting.
Did they talk much about, I forget, with the legalization of marijuana and the impact in the schools on that?
They touched on it, but I think that what I got out of it was that wait for more guidance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That they were reluctant to give any, the lawyer that was there was very reluctant to give any concrete recommendations because too much is up in the air, and that you could make a general policy that was similar for all on-site administration of medication, including medical marijuana, the same policies in place, but as far as recreational, they basically said grouping it with any other type of drug substance
Controlled
policy
substance,
that you
yeah.
have on site, but more to come and how to handle it. It was interesting.
that
It was
is
very
interesting.
vague.
And I'm not sure, I'm going to show my ignorance here, medical marijuana would fall into a different category that doesn't upset the feds, but the other challenge would be that in terms of legalization, when states do this, the feds are not on board with that. we get funding, whether it's passed through or directly from the feds, and some of that goes to our health office. So I wonder how that will play into it, right? That we could potentially be in violation of one funder statute,
Right.
and one in the same physical space.
And they looked at staff versus students themselves too, so
Mhm.
there's that other challenge.
I went to a session also that talked quite a bit about open meeting law, warrants, being part of open meeting, agendas and how to structure agendas. They actually gave quite a few examples of other districts that ranged from, agenda much like ours to an agenda that was literally 6 pages long with time slots for every single item and some of the benefits of that approach versus some of the pitfalls, where folks placed public comment was different from district to district. That was interesting. Some districts had it right up front so as to try to encourage public to come out, whereas other districts placed it somewhat in the middle to encourage the public that did come out to actually hear some of the important topics that were being discussed. So it was very interesting to hear from these different committees. They talked about, a number of people asked about use of electronic devices to access agendas and materials, and while that was absolutely permitted, one of the things that was brought up was about use of devices during meetings, like actually having some issues in districts where people are texting each other. They have a large enough committee, like, 15 people, and they're texting across.
No, Heather,
the
don't
table.
say that.
Yeah, I know. So but it was very interesting to hear some of that as, as different, larger and different committees are.
I would think that would be a violation of open meeting law.
It is.
Yeah.
Well, so
That's what you
anything
can.
communicated during that is subject to open records.
Right.
Yeah.
And then I think finally with the warrants being on here, you had spoken with Fred.
Yep.
That it was reinforced in one of my meetings that the approval, the fact that we approved warrants in the past month needed to be cited as part of our agenda. And so you'll see that as a new action item. Not that we are awaiting that approval in our meeting, because we approve these warrants as they come through from week to week, but more it's subject to open record, open meeting, that we have been approving these over the past month.
And I would say one thing that I integrated from our session that I went to with Tara and Keith on social emotional, and I'm glad you pointed that out because I thought it was nuts. I'm like, didn't I read family engagement?
Yeah.
Somewhere? I mean, it's a great session, but I thought I'd lost my mind, so okay, thank you. That it's important not only, in the evaluation of the meeting on your agenda, there's always 3 questions that we have. And actually, the questions were originally taken from a book, the Effective School Boards book. So there's a woman, Nancy, I forget her last name, who, out of Harvard, that did a lot of research on what effective school boards do. One of them is they have their own goals in addition to the district goals, but that they make sure their meetings focus on the topics embedded in these questions. But I added, to what extent did discussion and action items focus on teaching and learning? That was always there. The emotional health and well-being of students. I added that because that was a big topic.
Okay, I think we've gotten through all our business. We have one action item, approval of warrants submitted in August 2017 remaining. Do we have a motion for that?
Motion to approve the warrant submitted in August 2017.
Second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor? It was interesting, some districts had a consent agenda, which I've seen the town do, where you have kind of housekeeping items, and some districts put minutes and warrant underneath that consent agenda right up front. So that may be one way to think about positioning it so that it's business that's taken care of.
Can I just say the last thing that's in your packet? I'll make a habit of putting this in here. These are the conditions for school effectiveness. As you've heard mostly for Tara and Keith, that the school committee started the spring before I arrived, the spring of 2014, doing a family and community engagement survey. They purposefully built the original questions around these conditions for school effectiveness. They're from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. In their second go-around, they realized, for obvious reasons, there were some things, the feedback was that some parents were saying, I couldn't even observe this if I wanted to. And so they focused the questions to those things that parents would actually have more access to observing. But our district strategy, the evaluations and standards of effective practice that you saw tonight include these things. And so I'm just making it more transparent for you. I always look at these before an agenda and make sure that throughout the year that I provided you with information to demonstrate that we are looking at these things and talking about them. So tonight, we talked about student assessment, we talked about tiered instruction and adequate learning time.
And to Tara's earlier question also about the retreat, which sounds far more, exotic or civilized. Yeah. Is that something that that was the first one I had gone to when we did that?
It was the first one I had gone to as well.
Yeah.
And you created a district strategy document that goes from 2015 to 2018. So to your question about do the goals continue, my goals are directly aligned, and all of that is aligned to the standards for effective practice. So you'll see, I'll be bringing back, based on your feedback, how can I fine tune these goals? But that strategy document goes through the end of this year. And so it would be time for the school committee to get together again. We did spend a lot of time at the Planning for Success conference to help with strategic planning over the summer. So we would be doing another one. We would schedule that.
Okay. And I like the idea of exploring this thought of school committee goals. Because you have district goals, you have your goals, but we have goals as to, we've always talked about, here's the approach that we've always taken in reviewing. Typically, it comes around the budget, right? In that we wanted to maintain services and not cut positions. So where we can shift resources if we need to fill gaps, then that is our preference before having to make that decision of cutting. So things like that I was, have learned as we've gone through this. It's not necessarily spelled out anywhere as kind of whether that's an annual process that we agree on those goals, and they're tied to our district goals. They're supported by the district goals, or how, in thinking about new members coming on, how that might be helpful in framing, well, these are our goals for the coming year. So that may be a good activity to embed in that retreat.
I would agree with that. As a new member, that would be really useful. I know that's something that, like, at my work we do.
Yeah.
So it would just be very, I think it would be a great process, and I think it would be a very worthwhile endeavor.
Okay, so we'll add that as a future topic to figure out timing of conducting that meeting. Okay, our next meeting is September 25th, 5:30. Does that date work for everybody?
Yes, I'm on track with that.
Me neither.
September 25th.
Yes. Okay,
Sounds good.
great.
Sounds good.
Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Thank you. Thanks.